Welcome back to the Comp Closet podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Sarah, and today we are chatting to an absolute standout athlete and FMG bikini pro, Mia Broedelet. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited.
No worries. I'm super excited to hear more about your journey because I feel like I started following you from your last show, and then you obviously had a bit of an off season, went pro and competed in Worlds. So really excited to hear the story of how you got to that point. So let's go back to the very beginning. What first drew you into fitness?
So growing up, I was actually a rhythmic gymnast. So probably from the age of like 6, maybe I got into it. So very quickly that turned from, just getting out of after school care to training at an elite level. So I used to train about 40 hours a week up until I was 17. So I have a history in sport, I guess you could say, but I never did any sort of team sports or any of that. So always rhythmic gymnastics. However, when I was 17, I had meniscal surgery. So I had 70% of my meniscus removed from what at the time seemed like a kind of freak accident. I was just training one day and then the next day I was in hospital, but apparently it was sort of accumulating over time. But basically from there, I tried to go back into gymnastics, but after about 6 months, I just realized I'd lost my nerve. Plus, at that point, I was about to go into uni, I was finishing school. So, big decision there, decided to pull out. However, during my rehab, I had a physio who used to go to the gym with me once or twice a week. And that was the first time I had ever stepped foot into a gym. So that's like the sort of turning point where I got into fitness and sort of the gym side of things. But it wasn't until a few years later that bodybuilding, I guess, came about. So that was the start. So I do come from a history of sport, but nothing gym related for a while. So yeah.
Yes, amazing. So you were training 40 hours per week, but I'm assuming that was completely different to gym training, right?
Yes, the goal was to be strong, but basically as small as possible. As a rhythmic gymnast, you are in tiny little leotards. It was never focused on building muscle and strength and actually fueling your performance. So when I stopped gymnastics, I actually put on a lot of weight because I just had no idea. There was no sort of education around, strength, building muscle, food, anything really. It was just be super tiny. And I think training, that amount of hours and being sort of a young kid, I just never had to worry about any of those things. It was definitely a big shift coming out of that.
Yes, absolutely. And then how did you actually discover bodybuilding? Did you just see it online or did you know someone doing it?
I actually had no idea what it was. Like growing up, bodybuilding was not even a topic of conversation, let alone something I'd ever considered. And then I started training at a gym that did classes. So I went and I did like spin classes and hit classes, all that kind of stuff. I thought that was going to be my thing. And the instructor at the time actually was in a bodybuilding prep. And she was telling me about this thing that she was doing. And I was like, wow, what's that? Basically, like, did a little bit of research and for probably like 6 months to a year thought, oh, that's really cool, but I could never do that. It was one of those things that you sort of looked up to and think, wow, like they are so crazy, but that could never be me. I could never look like that. Then, yeah, probably about 6 months after that, one day I sort of woke up and I just thought, you know what, let's just give it a crack. Let's just give it a crack. It seems like so right up my alley, like especially that performance side of things. After being a gymnast, I hadn't done anything like that for quite some time. And I hired a coach within the week and got started basically. So
Insane. And can you paint a bit of a picture of your first ever prep? Like, what were you expecting? And then what was the prep actually like?
I think honestly, I was one of those people that I recommend people not to be like. And I sort of just dived straight in. I had no idea. I think I started watching some YouTube videos and did a little bit of research, but I had I had no friends who had done a prep, really had no idea. And I probably only had been with a coach for maybe like 3 months before actually beginning that prep journey. It was sort of a little bit all over the place in that sense, but at the same time, I think coming from that background of gymnastics, I had that structure and discipline in place, and I loved following a routine. So I didn't have a problem sort of throwing myself 100% into it. But yeah, I didn't really have any expectations other than it was more of a bucket list thing. I thought, oh, I'm just going to do this once, tick off this goal, get on stage, no pressure. But then obviously, as you sort of get into a prep, you realize, oh God, I'm really in for it now. By the end, I had just fallen in love. So that was the beginning.
Yes, and tell me about your first show experience, like what happened with that whole
Yeah,
day
so
and outcome.
my first show was actually ICN back in 2022, I want to say. So, yeah, 2 years before my first FMG show, I did ICN and NBA. And I actually took out the overall in both of those federations, which was obviously very unexpected, but very exciting at the time. So, I think obviously doing well in that federation sort of made me realize, oh, okay, like I actually do fit in here. Because even going into the show, it was still just like, oh, I'm just doing this for fun, doing it for myself, which I think is a good thing in a way. But yeah, then coming out of those shows, it was definitely a moment of, okay, like this, I can do something with this. Like if I keep going and I actually now go into an off season, which I'd never done before, build muscle, then there's definitely potential here. So yeah, that was my first ever show back then.
Yes, and then tell me about your first FMG show as well.
Yes, my first FMG show was the best experience ever. So it was Sydney in 2024 last year. So coming out of ICN, I thought I was going to be an IFBB girl. I was like, nah, this is the next step for me. Like I want to take this seriously, so I have to go into IFBB. FMG was just glitz and glam. It was a little bit too it seemed too kind of show pony sort of vibes for me. I'd never been to a show, never really looked into it. It was WBFF at the time, and I just saw these girls in crazy bikinis, and I thought, nah, like that's not for me. But then I met my partner Dylan, and he was competing with WBFF at the time, and he said, just come to a show. Like he said to me, he said, by the end of this weekend, I can guarantee you'll have changed your mind. And I was so adamant, like, nah, absolutely not. This is not for me. By the end of the weekend, I came home and I said, I'm getting on that stage. I said, like, this is so cool. Like, I didn't realize how much of a sport it still was, even with all that extra sort of bits and pieces, the sparkly bikinis. You're still being compared, and everyone's physiques were still like crazy, but also achievable in a way. Like I looked at those girls and thought, okay, if I really commit to this, like I can get up on that stage, and I know that I can look like that. So yeah, that was the first sort of introduction into FMG. But then getting on that stage was just crazy. It was so different to ICN, like it's a whole week basically by the time you do all the photo shoots and media night and show day. It was so much more than I had expected, I guess. And it was amazing. Like the community's great. The stage is so much bigger. So I had an absolute blast.
Yes, I love that. And then what did you learn from that first show that kind of shaped your off season and then how you approached the New Zealand show this year?
Yeah, so I think again, coming into FMG last year, I sort of went in with that no expectation sort of mindset, I guess, again. Like I knew that I could do well, and I knew that obviously coming off the back of ICN, like, maybe I do fit in here. But at the same time, I still felt like a very small fish in a very big pond. And I just sort of went in, no expectations, thought, let's just give this a crack. But then coming second, I was like, wow, okay, like it's sort of like it's the same process, but just on another level now. And I thought, okay, like I can do this. There's actually like potential for me here, and it definitely lit that spark. So in terms of prep, like it didn't really change anything because I am that OCD 100% person tracking to the gram. Like when I start prep, I have to go all in and have to give it 100%. There's no sort of deviations. So in terms of prep, I did the same thing, I guess, but I think it was that extra spark and that extra fire that maybe I gave, training sessions more. I really locked in to that next level because I had a specific goal in mind. I'd never really gone into a show thinking, okay, like I want to win, and like it was always like, oh, whatever, what happens, happens. And this time it was like, okay, like I have this goal. So it really gave me that drive to just keep going and pushing harder. So
Did
yeah.
you have any moments as well during that off season or during that prep where you questioned that you could actually get the win and get the pro card?
Oh, 100%. You know, it was like something that after coming second, you think, okay, well, that's the next logical step, but it's definitely not guaranteed. You know, I think some people come off, you know, coming second and think, oh, well, I have to win next time. And it's like, well, no, you can come last still. You know, you never know what's going to happen. So, yeah, definitely once you sort of ride that high and then you go back to sort of just regular life, like, you know, it's definitely those thoughts crept in of, you know, I have no idea who's going to be on this stage. You know, some of these physiques that are coming in are just phenomenal. Some of these amateurs, they are just looking absolutely nuts. As well as like, I have a full time job outside of bodybuilding, so my off season isn't perfect in any way, shape, or form. I actually said to my coach when I started prep, I said, "Oh, I don't really think I've done very much." I said to him, like, are you sure I can actually prep now? Like, I don't really think I've trained very hard. I didn't track my macros every day. Like, I sort of just enjoyed life. And he said to me, like, just wait, like, you'll be fine. But I definitely didn't see that in myself until probably coming off stage, not even getting on stage. It was like that moment coming off that was like, oh, okay, I did it. Like, I actually did work hard. So, yeah.
And how did it feel when they actually called your name as a new FMG pro?
So surreal. I think I had envisioned it probably every single day throughout my prep. Like going to sleep, I would picture that moment. But then when you actually start to get up on stage, it all then becomes very real. You know, there's other girls there, you're competing against other people, and you think, wow, like there's so many other people who are so deserving of this as well. So I think then they were counting down 3, 2, oh God, like surely. And then hearing my name was just, yeah, it was a moment you can't top, I think, especially when you've been working for towards something for just so long. It's like you can't describe it. It was so much fun. It was amazing.
Yes, oh, I love that so much. And then you competed in Worlds, which was just 2 weeks later, right?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Crazy. So straight onto the world stage for your pro debut and you placed top five. What was that whole experience like?
That was kind of like a whirlwind experience. Like I knew I live in Brisbane. Doing the Gold Coast show was just a guarantee, basically. That was the original show I wanted to, and I thought, well, like, why don't we do New Zealand just as a bit of a warm up, I guess? So the Gold Coast show was locked in. I had my bikini bought, locked in. It was like I had to go. But coming off New Zealand, it was like, oh, okay, like now I actually have to step up on a pro stage. And I contemplated not doing it for like the first week. I thought, no, like I am so not ready to then do this next show. But it was kind of the opposite to coming into New Zealand. Like coming into New Zealand, I had pressure on myself and I had expectations. I knew what I wanted. I felt as though I definitely would fit in on stage. Like I knew that I had done it last year. So I had that sort of expectation there. Whereas coming into Worlds, I had absolutely no expectations. Anyone who spoke to me in the 2 weeks beforehand, I was like, nah, like this is going to be the best day of my life because I'm just going to go up there. I don't care how I do. In a sense, it's like I've already achieved everything I wanted to achieve this season. So anything that happens at Worlds is just, you know, the icing on top. It's an extra bonus. So no expectations, just let's just go and have fun and give it my all. But then getting to Worlds show day, I have never been so nervous. New Zealand, I was really not nervous at all. I think I was just so calm and collected. Whereas Worlds showed, I remember waking up and I was so scared. I think like realizing in that moment of like, okay, now I have to stand up on stage next to all these girls that I have looked up to for so long. Yeah, it was a completely different experience, but the atmosphere at Worlds was just electric. Like it was the getting on stage was so much fun, and it was the best show day experience I've had so far because of the crowd, the audience, just in that lineup was, yeah, you can't describe it. It was so much fun.
Yes, and that lineup was absolutely insane as well. Like anyone who was watching Worlds or even watching online would agree. Like that is the most
It was
competitive lineup I've ever seen. So, like placing fifth in your pro debut in that lineup is a massive achievement. So,
I couldn't
congratulations.
be happier. anyone I talk to again will know that I am so happy. Like, I could not have done any better. Like, I didn't want anything more from this season. I exceeded every expectations where I've walked away just knowing that I am so like content now.
Yes, absolutely. And then tell me about your work as well. Like, what is your job role?
So I am an electrical engineer. So I work in mining. I graduated uni last year with a bachelor of and masters of mechatronic engineering. So I'm very separated from the fitness world, which most people don't assume.
Yes. And like, is there any struggles with balancing bodybuilding with such a technical career?
It's definitely hard, and it means that I can't sort of just go into a prep whenever I want to prep and do back to back shows because it takes a big toll on my work. Definitely doable, but takes a lot of effort and a lot of mental resilience to both prep and then also switch on at work. Like, people know at work what I'm doing, but at the same time, they don't really have any idea. And some people you can't really share that information with because they'll be like, oh, well, like, I don't care that you're doing a prep. So I really have to show up and be my usual personality as well. So that's what made it very difficult, as well as, like, even in the office, there's lots of social events, lunches, drinks, all that kind of stuff because they are so like separated from the fitness industry. So I think just managing all of that as well as just time management with all my prep sort of to dos. But I think if you sort of structure it out, like, anyone can do it. I think about single mums who balance prep and working and a child, and I'm like, if they can do it, then I can do it.
Yes, absolutely. It puts things in perspective. But what advice would you give to someone who is potentially working in a demanding role and they're in an office and they're in that environment where there's drinks and food and everything like that, but they potentially want to do a prep? What advice would you give them?
Just have your routine like so locked down. Like, I have developed this routine, I think, just over years of doing this, but everything has to be planned out. My days were structured, which made it a lot easier. So I sort of just go into this like robot state of just wake up, do what I need to do. I have to-do lists all in my phone of everything I need to do outside of prep and then everything I need to do for prep, and just ticking it off every single day. And yeah, just waking up and having that routine and structure to follow. Simple things like meal prepping on the weekends. You have to say no to some work events, I think. Like, as I went on, I found it easier to actually just share and tell people what I was doing. My first prep, I had started my job during prep, so I sort of tried to get around it and, say the whole, oh, I'm not hungry, or, oh, like, maybe next time. Whereas this time I was very just like, okay, I'm actually in a bodybuilding prep, so I can't eat XYZ. And there's always going to be people who say, oh, just have a bite. And as much as that can be annoying, you just have to understand that they have no idea what you're doing. Like, if anything, they're just trying to be nice. So just going and having that goal in the forefront of your mind, just having that, your why, I guess, so strong that it doesn't phase you. And yeah, that's really all I did.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with all of that. Like, I came from a background in a corporate role as well. So when I first started prepping in that, I was in like an office environment, and I completely agree with you. It can be hard sometimes, but I think once you have that mindset that like prep is a choice, I'm choosing to do this, which means I'm choosing not to have all of those other things. It just makes it so much simpler and so much easier, I feel. And like you said as well, explaining it to people, not that they'll always understand, often helps. Like, most people will actually ask questions and be really interested in it and, like, support you through it, but they're not necessarily going to understand how much energy goes into it and how low your energy might be at the end of a prep.
I was so surprised how many people were actually really interested. Like, telling people I was in prep, I thought they'd be like, oh, like, you're doing bodybuilding. And there was a few people like that, but for the most part, everyone was actually so intrigued and interested, which was like actually made it so much easier to share what you're doing. So then they sort of follow along as well.
Yes, so true. And then I feel like everyone always knows someone, whether it's like a distant cousin's husband or something that did a bodybuilding prep once, and they kind of relate it to that, which was always
There
cool.
was actually a lady in my office who's probably like in her I want to say 30s. And she was like, "Oh, I did WBFF 10 years ago." I was like, "Are you?" So then she messaged me like in Peak Week, being like, happy Peak Week. And I was like, "This is like, you never would have found that because it's not something that people talk about."
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And what's one assumption you would say people make about you that is completely wrong?
I think the fact that I'm an online coach, everyone I meet, they think, "Oh, you're just an online coach, aren't you?" And I'm like, "No, no, I'm not." And I think I definitely would like to go into the fitness industry in some capacity, potentially down the track. But yeah, I think that's the first assumption people usually make about me. And when I tell them I'm an engineer, they're always like, it's like that shock of, oh, because I think, come across it like that in social settings. I'm sort of just like little and bubbly and bouncy and talk very fast, as you can probably tell. So that's probably, yeah, the one thing that people, because I don't really share it very much. So most people don't really know unless I talk to them.
Yeah, I love that. And then looking back over your whole comp journey, what part of you would you say has grown the most?
I think definitely my confidence. Coming out of, as I said earlier, being a gymnast, I put on a lot of weight in that first few years post school. So, sort of like 18 to 21. I went to uni, I did what every uni student does, and they drink and party and eat junk food all day. And, I wasn't healthy in any way, shape, or form. And it really took a toll on my confidence. I used to wear baggy hoodies all the time. I really didn't like the way I looked, but I didn't know what to do about it. And I think just that belief in myself, like I felt as though I'd sort of lost touch with who I was, and coming out of having such a structured and disciplined life to having none of that, I definitely felt quite lost and I didn't really know what I was doing, basically. So I think going through this whole bodybuilding journey, I have been able to really reconnect with that side of myself and just develop a much better sense of confidence within myself, and just knowing that like I can actually achieve what I set out to achieve, especially like, coming into that very first prep, I thought like, I could never do this. I just had no belief in myself and no confidence. But now it's like, okay, like I never thought I could do this, but here we are. I got my pro card. I came fifth in a world lineup. Like, who would have thought, basically? So yeah, definitely just that mindset side of things, and yeah, I think just challenging myself and knowing that it's possible.
Yes, I think the mindset growth through bodybuilding is just next level, like nothing else compares.
People always say like, you'll learn so much about yourself in a prep, and you can't even really describe to someone like what you mean by that until you do a prep. Like, you just exceed everything you thought you could ever do, and it's like applies to all aspects of life. Now it's like, okay, well, I did that prep, I managed to get through all those hard days, so I can get through anything.
Yes, absolutely. And what is something you wish every new competitor knew about the process of going pro?
I think that it takes a lot more time and commitment and just energy than people think. Some people go into a prep thinking, oh, like, I'm going to go pro in my first show. And it happens. People do that. And often they do come from a background of some sort of elite level sport, and they have that base. Or maybe they're just completely genetically blessed, lucky them. But I think just the time and discipline and just commitment it takes every single day, not just in prep, but before the prep, after the prep, but then particularly in that prep phase, like you have to give it 100%. Like, from the day you start prep, you can't, have a slip. You can't really slip up, like, and again, maybe some people do and they sort of get away with it, but for the average person who's trying to prep, if you want to go pro, like you have to just give it 200% every single day, every single step of your cardio, every single, session, give it 100% every single day for 6+ months. Like, it's not something that you can just sort of, yeah, let's just do a prep. It takes so much out of your life, social life, work life. Like, you sort of lose that balance that everyone's trying to achieve. Yeah, in a prep, there is no balance. So, yeah, if you're going to prep, just have that all considered and make sure everything is lined up in your life already, that you're already tracking your food, training hard, you've got that routine in place. So then when you start prep, it's not like this huge, change in your life that's like, you're trying to work that all out at the same time as well.
Yes, I could not agree with that more. And what are you working towards next?
Good question. And so many people have asked me that, and I don't really have an answer right now. It's the first time coming off stage where I haven't immediately had that next goal. After my ICN show, I was like, yeah, I'm doing this again. Loved the process. And then last year, coming second, I was like, cool, like I have to go again now as soon as I can because I want to win and I want my pro card. And I think if I had just done the New Zealand show, then it would be like, okay, now I have to do my pro debut. It's like that next. But I sort of did that obviously at Worlds, and I did better than I possibly could have imagined at Worlds. So I think now I'm like, I'm not stuck, but I'm just like taking a bit of time to actually just reset and enjoy my life a little bit. Still training, still doing all the things, but I think for me, like I was on that sort of top end of bikini from a like muscle density perspective, and that was in my feedback for both shows. So the logical next step would be to step up to athletic. Because obviously I still want to train and I want to train hard, so that's the next step. But it's a little bit of a jump obviously to get from bikini to athletics. So in terms of when that happens, no, I don't know, I'm just riding the wave, and I'm happy with that. I have no, again, like as I said, I'm very content coming out of this season with what I've done. I definitely put a lot aside for work as well as just my personal life. Especially like with Dylan, he's going to compete next year. So I'm like, you have your time. I can support you. So yeah, I think there's just a lot I need to do outside of prep before I jump back into a prep. Financially as well, prep is a very expensive hobby. So yeah, I think I'm at the point where there's no time frame. I'm just going to ride the wave and see what happens in the next couple of years. So
Yes,
yeah.
amazing. And for anyone who wants to follow your journey, where's the best place to connect?
My Instagram is miabrodelet.fitness, and I also do posing coaching, and that Instagram is Move with Mia, which is in my main bio as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. I think it's so inspiring to hear from someone who, has come from a different background and also isn't in the fitness industry, like you said. It's really refreshing and really nice to hear. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
No worries. And thank you so much to our listeners as well. If you could follow and rate this on whatever platform you're listening on, and also share your stories on Instagram, tag Mia, myself, and the Comp Closet. We love to see what you learn or what you're up to while you're listening to it. Thanks so much.